How to sell your home as a for sale by owner, cut out the realtors and save yourself tens of thousands of dollars in commission. Now, if you are thinking of selling your home, you might be thinking, should I use a realtor or maybe I should just do it myself? Cut out the realtor, save yourself a lot of money. How hard could it be, right? If you are asking yourself those questions, you're gonna wanna stick around. My name is Ryan Gillard. I'm a local realtor here in Calgary with Real Broker, and this video is all about how to sell a home as a for sale by owner. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would a realtor make a video about this topic? Isn't it against my own self-interest to do such a thing? It is, but my intention behind this video is to show you how to sell a property from start to finish, all the planning, all the steps to go from the very beginning to the very end successfully, in the hopes that those watching it realize how difficult, how timely, and how costly it could be to sell as a for sale by owner and reach out to me versus going solo. So if you're out there watching this video and you could use some help, please reach out to me. All of my information is in the written description below. You can call, text, email, and comment, and I will get back to you. So as you're watching this video, I'd like you to ask yourself two questions that should be in the back of your mind. Number one, is the perceived savings in commission worth all the work, all the headache, the time and money by going solo? Are you really gonna save that much money by going as a for sale by owner? And number two, are you focused on beating the system by getting some sort of break in commission? And are you forgetting about the total sales price, which is statistically way higher with a realtor, 10% higher on average? So let's get into it. Let's talk about how to sell as a for sale by owner. And step number one, let's pull the title.
So let's look at the title first. So step number one, regardless if you're a realtor or a for sale by owner, you should pull the title. And a lot of realtors forget this as well. So it's one thing to be mindful of, and it could have some important ramifications. And it could even prevent the sale itself if you're not careful. So you should always pull the title. So I have this one. This is a live deal I'm working with right now. And I pulled this one up because it's very complicated. So I did block off everything personal, but it gives you an idea of what's happening. So this is a condo townhouse that I sold. So it would have the condominium plan, unit number, unit factors. This is like the legal address that you see here. So it's different than the municipal address. You have the names of the owners right over here. And you'll always see, especially for condos, you'll see stuff like easements, the Mackenzie Town Council. So there's a homeowners association that's registered on title. So everybody that lives in Mackenzie Town, they pay a small fee every year. So that would pop up on the title. More easements, the mortgage is registered right here. You'll see this is an unusual one. There's a writ on this title by the Canada Revenue Agency. Now you don't want to have this on your title because they can be very difficult to deal with. You call them up and they don't really know what's going on. It seemed like in this case anyway. So this one delayed the entire process and was very difficult. So if you owe the Canada Revenue Agency money, you got to be careful because they could put a writ on your title. A caveat. So in this case, this person owed the seller money. So he put a caveat on the property. Now you might see other stuff like this. If you say you develop your basement and you don't pay the builder, he or she could put a caveat on your title as well. And you have to address these before you can sell because the buyer inherits a clean title. And so if you have stuff like the writ or the caveat, it definitely can cause problems. Other things, this deal, there was condominium fees that were outstanding. And again, these condominium corporations, they can put a caveat on your title so that when it sells, you pay back all those condominium fees that are outstanding. And lastly, on this transaction, there is pending litigation. So this property was almost in foreclosure. And so you'll see stuff like that. So the title can be very important. It should be the first step regardless if you're an agent or a for sale by owner. Regardless if you're on the buying end or the selling end, you should always pull the title as the first step in any transaction.
All right, so the second step, if you want to sell a property as a for sale by owner, you should call your bank and ask if there's a mortgage payout penalty, if you have a mortgage, obviously. Not so much a problem nowadays, just because our prices have gone up so much since 2020 that lots of sellers have so much equity. But when the market turns around and it becomes a balanced market or a buyer's market, I think this could be the difference between selling or not. Like I recall in 2016, 2017, we were in a pretty tough economy in Calgary and a lot of sellers were underwater. They didn't have enough funds to pay off the amount owing and they couldn't sell. And a lot of people wanted to sell, but they checked with their bank and they had like a massive payout penalty. And it was the difference between them listing and selling the home or having to wait for a couple of years in order to make that move. So it's one thing to check on for sure. Step number 3 is pricing the property. Now, obviously before you list the property and have the right price and everything like that, there is like preparation and stuff like that, which I will touch on later. I wanted to skip ahead to pricing just because this is where a lot of for sale by owners drop the ball. A lot of new realtors as well. They just have the wrong price and it causes more problems for them in the end. So I wanted to touch on pricing in more detail. So I call a lot of for sale by owners, so I'm very experienced with them. I've been calling them for like 10 years. I can make like 20 to 30 FSBO calls a day. So I come across them all the time and I get the same kind of responses over and over again and scenarios. So say for example, the property, the fair market value is say $500,000. In Calgary, the sales to list price ratio has been around 3% for the longest time. It goes up and down slightly. And so if fair market value is $500,000, you wouldn't want to list your property more than like say $515,000. That should be a good benchmark if you think it should sell around $500,000. That's what I would do given the choice. But you'll see a lot of for sale winners and they might be like $600 to $650,000. And they might be saying, bring me a buyer and I'll pay you the commission. Like, why would someone do that if they're going to help the buyer overpay by like $100,000? But I see this nonstop. And the mentality that a lot of these for sale winners or FSBOs have is they want to list high and leave room for negotiation. This is one of the biggest mistakes in all of real estate, not just for sale by owners, but even for like the regular sellers out there. This cancels so many transactions, listing high to leave room for negotiation. So let's talk about that in more detail. So listing high to leave room for negotiation, why is this so problematic? And I'd say one of the bigger reasons is that the buyers just don't see the property. So I have a lot of buyers on auto searches, and if they tell me that they're okay up to $500,000, I'll put the auto search to like $525,000 max. It's definitely not going to $600,000. Like I'd be sending them properties all day long that don't fit their criteria, and they would get annoyed and they would just cancel their auto search. So they're not seeing the property. Now the response I get to this quite often is like, why don't they just send us an offer? I get that all the time. And they don't, because people naturally procrastinate. If the buyer knows that it's high in price, they'll just wait you out. People always procrastinate, or they don't want to offend you, or they think that the price is so far above where they think it should be that they just don't want to waste their time. They don't feel like it's going to come together. So there are a bunch of reasons why listing high to leave room for negotiation, it cancels so many transactions. And the for sale winners are the biggest culprits with this tactic, I would say. And again, I think it does go back to the sales to list price ratio. Again, it's been around 3% in Calgary for the longest time. And so what I'm seeing is buyers want the seller to have a reasonable list price and they will act right away. You want the buyer to think that if they don't act, they will lose out. And if you are way overpriced, they don't have that kind of fear. So they'll just wait you out. Again, people naturally procrastinate. And so that's another reason why I would consider having the right list price from the start. Having the right price solves every single issue in real estate. So in terms of pricing your property, there's a few things that you should keep in mind. So it's not based off what your plans are. So if the home is worth $500,000 again, well, if I sell for $600,000, I can buy this home or do this or whatnot. So the market doesn't care about your plans, and neither does the buyer. And it's not based off the tax assessed value either. That number can be way out to lunch. Like I've seen some plus or minus $200,000. So it's not based off the tax assessed value. I will typically find out what that number is just so that I can be prepared. But in no way does it influence the price of the property. And another point is you want to be logical about this. A lot of people tell me that their home is better than their neighbor's. Well, if that home is identical to yours and it just sold like 2 weeks ago, your home is not going to be selling for way more than that home just because like the light shines from this angle or whatever. I get all sorts of weird things, but you want to be logical. If your neighbor's home is identical to yours, same size, same flow and whatnot, it's probably going to sell for a very similar price. So to price properly, you're going to want to look at a few things. So you want to look at what's actively available, what's conditionally sold, and what has sold recently. You don't want to go back longer than 90 days. The market can change. Like this time last year, things were out of control. Properties were selling at one day in the market with like competing offers, like way over list price. So it's always changing. So only go back about 90 days. You want to compare apples to apples. So if you have a bungalow to a bungalow, or maybe even a bi-level, you compare a 2-story to a 2-story. You know, if the property has a detached garage versus an attached garage, you want to keep it similar. So same age, same square footage. If it has a walkout basement, just compare it to walkout basement properties. If some neighborhoods have estate areas where the home on paper might look similar, like it's a 2,000 square foot bungalow with 3 bedrooms up, blah blah, but it could be located in the estates area, so you can't really compare the normal area to the estates area. For condos, they typically go up in value per floor, and if there's a view, it could be way higher than the identical property on the other side of the condo complex. So there's stuff like that. If you're on a busy road, that typically takes off value versus the same identical home in a quieter area of the neighborhood. So there's all sorts of things they need to look into. Not the easiest thing to do. I can recall being a brand new agent and having issues with pricing. It's not as easy as it sounds, but you have to look at everything basically. And also, it's not based purely on price per square foot. A lot of people can make that mistake. The value of your home is based off the competition. So if 2 homes are identical, but your home is $30,000 higher than your competition because you use the price per square foot, it's probably not going to sell because the buyer might look at both properties and you might help sell the competition, because if the buyer can save 30 grand, they're going to do that. So you have to look at everything when you're pricing a property. And one last note on price per square foot. So we'll look at 2 different markets. So a hot market and a buyer's market. So in a buyer's market, you might do that calculation and come up with what your price should be, but all of your neighbors keep dropping their prices because there's not enough buyers for the amount of inventory. So they're being aggressive, trying to capture the buyers, and it's messing up the ratios. So again, it's like a beauty contest for the buyer at the right price. So that will, if you just use the price per square foot in this situation, it probably won't matter. And the opposite. So right now we're in a bit of a hot seller's market. There's no inventory. So there are gaps in the market that you could potentially, depending on the situation that you're in, you could potentially list higher than what the price per square foot is and actually sell it because there's no other competition in that area. So it's just a tool to look at, but I wouldn't use it like as a religion. You got to make sure to look at everything that's happening in the market to price your home properly. So we spoke about timing earlier, and I'm going to go back into it in just a bit more detail from the perspective of a for sale by owner that I recently spoke to, just to give you some more insight on both timing and pricing and whatnot. So as I'm filming this is March of 2023, so our conditions are still pretty good. We're getting a lot of immigration into Calgary. There's not much inventory. So it's still a bit of a seller's market, but by no means is it as crazy as this time last year, where we were getting offers, like in some cases, $200,000 over list price, unconditional offers, sight unseen. So a lot of craziness happening this time last year. And I bring this up for 2 reasons: to give you an example of timing and pricing with the for sale by owner. So typically in Calgary, the best time of the year to sell a property is like April or May. During normal conditions, that's usually the busiest 2 months of the year in terms of real estate sales. So in this case, the for sale by owner, that's what they did. They listed their property as a FSBO in, I think it was April or May, and they tried on their own for like a month or 2 and it didn't sell. With all that crazy activity, they still didn't sell it. And so timing became a bit of an enemy, and they hired a listing agent. But now they dragged it along into the summer months now. So now they're back into June or July and stuff like that. But what happened is the market conditions, they didn't soften. They just got back to normal. So things balanced out with all the interest rate hikes and whatnot, and all the craziness kind of evaporated. And so I'll use the example of the $500,000 home example. A lot of for sale winners will be okay paying at least half the commission. So on a $500K property, the total commission might be around like $20,000, and they might be okay, paying 10 grand to someone that brings a buyer. By trying to save 10 grand, it probably cost them 30, 40, 50 grand because there were so many offers over list price at that time of the year. And the other point I would make is you have to be mindful of what's happening with the market conditions, because last year and this year as well, the right strategy would have been to list January, February, March versus waiting until April or May, just because that's where there's a huge surge of activity and they waited too long. So you have to keep an eye on what's happening in the market, basically. This is just one example of like a for sale winner, like, dropping the ball and not getting the full amount of money they could. So the next point I'd like to make is you need to be adaptable on price. Now, I say this because I can recall back in like 2015, 2016, I would list a property and I thought I'd nailed the price and that should sell right away. And I just found out that it just kind of floundered on the market and we had to do like price drops. And the reason being, it was a bit of a declining recession type market. And a lot of the sellers out there were hungry to sell and they were dropping their prices. So you have to constantly be watching the market and you need to adapt. If the neighbors' homes are similar to yours and they've dropped their price, you have to compete against them. For the buyer, it's they'll pick the best price and the one that looks the best. So it's a beauty and a price contest. So you can't just be like the grumpy FSBO and cross your arms and this is my price, take it or leave it. You have to be mindful of what's happening and adapt to the price changes. And alternatively, in an up market, so a hot seller's market, probably the easiest conditions for a for sale bidder to sell on their own. But there can still be some challenges for various reasons, which we'll touch on as we go along here. And a good rule of thumb that has done me well since I've started in real estate is if I list a property for sale and it's on the market for like 10 to 15 days or whatever, and you're getting a lot of showings but no offers, you're almost always 5% too high in price. If you make that adjustment, you'll almost always sell the property. If you come on the market and nothing is happening at all, and time is going on, nothing's happening, you could be 10% too high. And this kind of strategy has done me well since I started in real estate. It almost always works. So using that strategy as a FSBO, it could be a bit complicated because their numbers aren't the same as my numbers. We're not comparing apples to apples here. It's a different ball game as a for sale by owner. It could be way more challenging and for various reasons that we'll get into. So let's talk about adjusting prices as a FSBO in more detail. Now, if you deal with the for sale by owner often like I do, you'll hear this expression quite often that a for sale by owner will typically sell for 10% less on average than a home listed with a real estate agent, which is, by the way, is way more than the conventional commission. But if I tell a for sale by owner this, they're just going to tell me to piss off. Like you can't just tell us, oh, you're going to get 10% less. Like they won't believe you. But so how does this actually play out? Now, I'm not a manager or a trainer. This is just from my experience dealing with for sale winners. Again, I call them like 2 to 3 hours a day. I've been doing this for like 10 years. So I'm very experienced with for sale winners and I come across their scenarios like nonstop. So this is just one way where they take a lot less money, how it actually plays out in reality. So how does this play out in reality? So what's happening behind the scenes here? So you've got a for sale winner, and we'll use the example of the $500,000 property. So they have it listed for say $515,000 to $520,000. So it's a reasonable price. They're trying on their own for like say 2 to 3 months. It doesn't sell. And eventually time becomes the enemy and maybe they just get frustrated. It is really time consuming to sell a property and they eventually hire a listing agent. Well, what happens is that the buyers and the agents can see the history of the property. The buyers always ask me, how long has it been listed? What was the price? They're very curious of the history of a home. And good luck convincing the buyer to pay like the $515,000 or the $519,000 now. So the listing agent talks with the for sale by owner and they agree to lower the price. Even though if they had started originally at that price, they probably could have sold for like $515,000. I've done this so many times that we have to use a new price now because the buyers think it's been tested already at that price. So we lower the price and we're also now paying the listing end and the buyer's end fee. And again, it's long days on the market, so you start to get the buyers come out of the woodwork that are looking for lowball offers and stuff like that. So you've eliminated a lot of the hot buyers, and you're at a lower listing price, and now you're paying the full commission on both ends. I've seen this like a million times. It happens nonstop. So this is just one example of how it plays out in reality. That the FSBO, when everything is said and done, they typically sell for 10% less on average. All right, so moving along to preparation. So, obviously price, that was a lot to take in. That was pretty heavy. This will be a lot easier to understand. So in terms of preparation, what I would do to start off with, now nobody ever seems to do this, but I would recommend it, especially as a for sale owner, it would really help you out, is to get a pre-home inspection done. I would spend the $500 just so I can understand what's happening with the property, and then I would fix, repair, replace, or disclose all of the items that need to be addressed. It'll be cheaper for you now to deal with this than if it does sell as a FSBO, for the buyer to come back to you after a home inspection wanting you to cover these items. So it's better to do it now. And so we'll start with the exterior of the property first, but keep that in mind, fix, repair, replace, or disclose anything that might pop up in a home inspection later on. So in terms of the exterior, common sense stuff. So I'd water the grass, cut the grass, water the grass, de-weed, trim the bushes, trim the hedges and trees. Make sure the trees aren't touching the roof or the siding. A home inspector will pick that up, and it could cost you down the road. I would pressure wash the siding, pressure wash the driveway. Like a lot of vinyl siding in Calgary, and over time it looks pretty gnarly, I think. It doesn't look the greatest, so I definitely want to pressure wash that. I think it can make a big difference. Clean up the porch area, depersonalize the outside. If you have like a gnome village or something like that, or lawn ornaments, I'd get rid of that stuff. Like the general idea is you want the buyer to imagine themselves living in the property. So try to keep it as neutral looking as possible. And the big item here is I would paint the exterior. Paint goes a long way. It's not super expensive, and it gives you the most bang for your buck. So consider painting the exterior of the property. So moving inside the home now. So what I would do is the two big items are to depersonalize and declutter. So what I would do is I'd go into the garage, I'd clean it all out, I'd take a good photo and measure it precisely so you can use it down the road when you list the property. And then I would start by putting all the junk in the garage, unless you're going to use a storage bay, but if not, put it all into the garage. As an agent, if I go into a garage and there's moving boxes and it's messy, I can see through that, and I think a lot of buyers can too. So if it's in the dead of summer, start packing up all the winter stuff, anything extra that you don't need, any extra furniture, start pre-packing it into the garage. So inside the property, again, the biggest bang for your buck is to paint the interior like a neutral color, like a white. If you've got funky colors like oranges, reds, and stuff like that, it'll be more of a distraction. You want the buyer to think of how they can live on the property. So if you painted like a nice white or a neutral color, it'll definitely be helpful and not super expensive to do that. What I wouldn't do is overhaul the property. Like, it's not going to make a huge difference. So if you say that you have like a 90s oak kitchen, but you put in quartz counters, it's not going to make any difference on the price of your home. Or if you have, again, like a 90s home, but you got one new bathroom in the property that costs you 10 grand, your home doesn't go up in value by 10 grand, and it probably won't make any difference at all. So don't make any drastic changes like that. You just want to be like the common sense stuff. So I would depersonalize. I would take everything off the top of the fridge, any kind of fridge magnets, get rid of any family portraits, any kind of travel photos, religious, political items, any kind of taxidermy. Like, you might love hunting, but you might offend the next buyer and they might not buy your home because of that. So any stuff like that, again, you have to live in the property, obviously, but you can still make it as move-in ready as you can for the buyers. You'll also want to have the home as clean as possible. I can't stress this enough. Like, make it as if the royal family was coming over for dinner. Like, clean it as best as you possibly can. If you hate cleaning, then just hire someone to do it. I think it can make a big difference. The other big item here are smells. So I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a property with a buyer and the buyer just walked out immediately. Like, strong cooking odors, smoking smells, cigarette smells, pets. Like, if it stinks, it's hard to sell. But there are machines that can help with this. They're called ozonators. So I'd look into something like that because it can make a big difference. I've gone on listing appointments and almost thrown up. The smell was so bad. And again, it's almost impossible to sell a home that stinks. Now, again, with the home inspection, the pre-home inspection, the big items I almost always come across are like the furnace, the roof, the hot water tank. You get GFC eye plugs are super annoying these days. So what I would do is I'd have them all looked at and get the furnace serviced and put a record of it on the kitchen counter or stick it right to the furnace itself so the buyers can see that it's been serviced. I can't tell you how many times I've had a home inspector tell me that, the furnace is old, budget for a new one. The buyer freaks out, and a lot of transactions will die off because of this. But if you have evidence that it's working in good shape and an expert has looked at it, you can diffuse that situation before it even starts. Same thing with the hot water tank. They're not super expensive to get new ones, but I'd have it looked at, keep a record of it, and show it to the buyer before they even view the property. Hard as a for sale bidder, but if you are like with a conventional listing agent, you can have that in the supplements on the MLS system and stuff like that. But if you're a FSBO, consider having records on your kitchen counter. Again, windows, you might want to fix them, but it's not going to add value to your home. It might help a deal from collapsing, but if you spend like 20 grand doing something, it's not necessarily going to give you 20 grand back, but it might prevent a deal from collapsing. But if you know the windows are old, just disclose it up front, so that way a buyer doesn't make an offer, then figure out the windows are bad, and then back out of the transaction. So stuff like that, if you're just upfront with people, you can save yourself a lot of headache down the road. Two other items that always seem to pop up are attic insulation or insulation over the attic hatch itself, and GFCI plugs. So the codes have changed over time, and these always pop up in home inspections, and they can be super annoying. But it's not overly costly to put extra insulation in the attic or to fix the GFCI plugs. If you're unsure what those are the plugs that are located close to water sources, and they're not expensive to fix. Like an electrician, call it like $100 an hour plus like the parts and labor. So maybe it's a few $100s to fix the plugs. It's not a big deal. And insulation, that always pops up. Not a big deal to fix that as well. But the general idea is don't give the buyer any ammunition to come back to you after a home inspection. If you can fix it or replace it or disclose it, I would do so. It'll save you so much time and headache. And actually, before moving on, there's one other item that I think always seems to pop up. That is, concrete always cracks, and almost all homes have some foundation cracks or cracks in the basement floor for unfinished basements. Not generally a big deal, but it scares the heck out of buyers. And so again, what you want to do is just diffuse the situation before it even pops up in a home inspection. So if you do the pre-home inspection, you find out there are some cracks, I would get them fixed in advance. So odds are that the buyer has a buyer's agent. It's pretty rare for a true FSBO, like FSBO and the buyer. That's pretty rare. There's almost always the buyer's agent involved, just because almost all buyers are working with realtors. And you can be guaranteed that realtor is guiding the buyer, on how to take away equity from the seller. And they might use excuses like this, like, oh my God, there's a foundation crack. Oh, the furnace is 20 years old. Even though it could be in fine working condition, they will use stuff like this to try to take away equity from you, because they know that you're unrepresented and you're maybe not as familiar with the process as they are. So again, I would get out in front of this, fix, repair, replace, or disclose anything up front, just to protect yourself and diffuse any of these situations before they can come up. And it'll cost you more money down the road by having the buyer come back to you wanting $5,000 off, because of GFCI plugs or some nonsense like that. So just be upfront with everybody. Moving along, let's talk about photos and measurements. Now, again, I do contact a lot of for sale owners, so I see a lot of weird things in terms of photos. I wouldn't do it yourself, even though like the new phones are pretty good. I would definitely hire a professional. They do look way better. And in terms of measurements, the rules in Alberta changed, and we need to be quite specific with our measurements. Now, the math isn't overly difficult. It's like length times width, or like triangles are half the base times the height. So the math isn't the problem. It's some of the guidelines can be a bit confusing. Like, are we using paint to paint? Or are we including wall thickness? Or like, what do you do for bay windows and like vaulted areas? So if you're not familiar with the guidelines, it could come back to haunt you. Like, there can be lawsuits and stuff like that in terms of measurements. So if you aren't familiar with the measurements, I would definitely hire someone to do it. The iGuide is a cool device. It's kind of like the virtual showing where you can click through the home and it shows you in real time where you're at. That also, it comes with the measurements. So that's one thing I would look at, is hire a professional that can do all that stuff at once. Moving along to listing and marketing your home. Now, I'll give you a few scenarios here. So the first scenario, and this is by far the hardest scenario, if this is the person that truly wants to do it as a for sale by owner. So there's no listing agent, it's not on the MLS, there's no buyer's agent, it's just the true grassroots movement. And So if you want to do this, it's going to be extremely difficult. 90% of all transactions in North America, not just Calgary, but North America, are listing agent to buyer's agent. So you're just dealing with the 10% here. Now, the majority of that 10%, I imagine it's going to be like builders, renovators, like investors. And it could be doable for the for sale by owner that has like mainly land value. Like say we're in Calgary, obviously. So if you're in the inner city of Calgary and you've got like a 50 by 120 foot lot and it's an R2 zoning, you can find out what the land value is pretty easily. And what I would do, I would just be calling up builders and renovators all day long. Like just all day long, calling them up, let them know what you have. Like I have a home in West Tilhurst. Here are it's 50 by 120 foot lot. This is the price I'm looking for. It's an R2 zoning. Let them know what you have and just call all day long, every day until it's sold. Now that might be pretty easy because it's black and white for these builders. They might have their own lawyers to draft stuff up. Like you never know. It's going to be difficult because a lot of these guys still want to have their own buyer's agent to look everything over. So odds are you're not going to sell it truly 100% no commission. You might have half of it. But again, you never know. But this is what I would be doing if I truly want to sell it on my own with nobody else involved. I would be on the phone nonstop every day, calling up builders, renovators, investors until it was sold. So it's not going to be easy, but it is doable as long as you put the work in. Scenario number 2 are like the typical people out there, like the regular family home. It's not just land value. So these people that want to sell it as a FSBO, they don't want to have a buyer's agent. This is going to be tough as well. Not impossible, but to do this, you're going to have the home marketed everywhere that you can think of. So if you don't want to be on the MLS with a listing agent, your options might be like Kijiji. Now, Kijiji, people buy like video games and lawnmowers off Kijiji, so it's not the best site for selling property. But you never know. I'm sure it does happen. Craigslist, not such a big thing in Alberta anymore, but you could use Craigslist. I don't think anything would happen, but you never know. Obviously, you'll want to have a sign out front. I've sold lots of properties from sign calls, so neighbors see it, they can tell people they know, and you might pick up some traffic just by having a sign out front. So I would definitely try to have something at least semi-professional looking and have your phone number on there. You could get lucky and pick up some traffic that way. Other avenues are Facebook. Now, Facebook does have that Facebook Marketplace, which I believe is kind of similar to Kijiji. I've personally never used Facebook Marketplace, so I can't comment on that. But I do routinely boost. So I do post my listings on Facebook and I boost them. So what a boost is, it's like an ad. So it shows up in like the feed and stuff like that. People can click on it and you can capture their information. Now, I'm sure everything does work if you do it enough, but boosting is more so for me to get buyer and seller leads than it is to sell the property that you're boosting. Sure, it looks good and impresses the seller, and maybe every now and then something does sell this way, but primarily this is used to get new leads. So it's going to be tough to sell your property this way, but it's an avenue that you might want to look at. Same thing with Instagram. You can post on Instagram. You can run ads on Instagram as well. Same idea. People click the ad. You can capture their information. Just stuff like that. TikTok is very similar to these social media sites. I'm not a big TikToker yet, but it's out there. Now another one you might want to look at is to run a Google ad. So to do this properly, you're going to have a landing page that connects to your website. So if you're a FSBO, you're going to have all these things set up. It's going to be costly. You're going to have to pay the monthly fees to have the landing page, the website. To run Google Ads is actually extremely expensive. So I do all these things, and the bill can get up there. And so my question to the for sale by owner is, why do all this? Why the headache? Odds are there's going to be a buyer's agent, so you're not really saving that much commission. You're going to have to pay like half the commission no matter what, pretty much. And all the extra money that you're going to be spending for like the Google ads, be boosting posts, all that marketing and stuff like that. I don't know if it's worth the time and the money to accomplish the task. For the most part, that's just my opinion. Another avenue I haven't mentioned yet, which I probably should have earlier, is YouTube. As you're watching this video, you can have your own YouTube channel and have your home on YouTube. You can do property tours. You can also run ads on YouTube. So just another way to try to get more activity. Now, a big one here for a lot of FSBOs is the open house. A lot of realtors as well, they love open houses. What I would say about open houses is they can be exhausting. If you have a full-time job and then you're spending all your weekends doing open houses, you can get burnt out really quick. They do work, but primarily agents do open houses to meet new buyers and sellers to sell them other properties, to add them to our pipeline, basically. Every now and then a property does sell that's being hosted as an open house, but it's actually quite rare. And you might spend a lot of time doing this and not really pick up much interest. But everything does work if you do it enough. Just it can be a bit exhausting if you have a full-time job and then all your downtime you're doing open houses. Other things that you can do is flyers and cold calling. So you can make up a neighborhood flyer. You can drop it off in all the mailboxes. You can door knock, like let them know your home is for sale. I have technology where I can put a map around a certain area of the city, and I can cold call that area. Make sure I'm not calling it the do not call list, because you can get yourself into trouble doing that. But to do this as a for sale winner, like no listing agent, no buyer's agent with this type of property, it's going to be tough, not impossible, but you have to take massive action. Scenario number 3. Now, this is the for sale by owner that is at least somewhat okay paying half the commission. So the buyer's end commission. Bring me a buyer and I'll pay you half the commission. That's one of the most common objections in real estate. So this person, their odds go way up. No, I wouldn't say way up. Their odds go up if they're willing to pay at least half the commission. And why is this the case? So our listing contracts in Alberta, we have a section for the listing, the total commission, and the buyer's end commission. And typically the seller puts the money, don't put the money up, but when the sale closes, the seller pays the commission. So to work with buyers, it's essentially free. So we can, run you all over the city, like showing homes on the evenings and the weekends. It doesn't cost the buyer anything. So we get paid when the sale closes from the seller. So there's a bit of a disconnect. If you're a for sale by owner and you don't want to list the property and you don't want to pay a buyer's end commission, well, guess what? You're going to have like less than 10% of the active buyers out there. The only people that are going to be available to you are like the investors, people that can't get qualified for loans, people that want some weird financing situations. All the great buyers are working with agents. And if you tell them you're not working with an agent, then you've lost like 90% of the buyers out there. So that's why the first 2 scenarios are so difficult, because all of the buyers are working with agents because it's free for them. Now, further on this, the buyer's agent is not your friend. So I do call a lot of FSBOs and they always want us to bring them buyers. This person is not your friend. So the buyer's agent has an obligation to get the buyer the best terms and price and whatnot. So if I'm bringing a buyer to a FSBO, you can be sure I'm guiding that buyer, how to get the best price, how to get the best terms. I'd be letting this buyer know, hey, they're not paying the listing end commission. You should be getting that money and whatnot. So they're not your friends. You're basically paying somebody to negotiate against you. So with this scenario, you're already paying half the commission that you normally would, like with the conventional listing, and now you're paying somebody to negotiate against you. So this is just another reason why potentially the FSBO can sell for less, which statistically they do, 10% less on average. This is just another way how it could play out. All right, so lastly, there are a few companies in Calgary. Actually, I'd say there's a bunch of companies in Calgary that will list for sale by owner properties. And I can't disparage any other realtors or other companies, but there are a few things that you should be mindful of. The first one, you'll see like 1 cent commission. Well, you're not going to get a lot of buyers or their agents with 1 cent commission. Like nobody wants to work for free. I also see like the seller is willing to negotiate the commission. Well, I don't really want to waste my time, so I want to know upfront like what it is, just so like nobody's wasting their time. And the last point is that in Alberta, we sign buyer contracts, and in these contracts, we have to explain how we get paid. So I'll be talking to a buyer and I'll say, we'll come across for sale winners during our search. We'll come across heavily discounted companies with the commission. But I tell them my expectation is I get paid, this percentage or whatever. I'm not going to say it on the air, but this is my percentage that I'm expecting. If that's not the case, are you okay paying the difference? And now almost all buyers will say, no, I don't really want to pay the difference. I'm concerned with my down payment. I don't want to get involved in that sort of thing. So now that you have direction from the buyer that you don't really want to see those types of properties. So even if you are on the MLS system, you're still going to run into some challenges like this because, the realtor wants to get paid. He's not going to be working for free. And you can't blame the buyer as well because, they're concerned with their down payment. They don't want to also have to pay like the commission now as well. So again, if you're on the MLS system, theoretically you could sell, you could save the commission, but in reality, it might be a different story. I'm sure it does happen, but like realistically, it's going to be a bit of a challenge still. So in terms of showings, what you want to do is get a good quality lockbox. You're not going to have like the Realtor Sentry lockbox, but try to get a good quality one. Some of the builder lockboxes can jam or they're kind of finicky to use. So try to get a good quality one and try to be out of the home for all showings. It's never a fun experience if the tenant is home or the homeowner is there. A lot of sellers can talk themselves out of transactions. So you're going to have the lockbox there and be out of the home. Another reason why you want to have a good quality lockbox is because it allows for easy access, obviously. Now, this is important because you lose half of the buyers that you want to reschedule because it doesn't fit your time. It's shocking. It happens all the time. All the working from home crowd, they're always canceling showings on me nowadays. And those buyers don't come back because they're out there with an agent. They look at 3 or 4 homes and they make an offer on the best one. And if your home is not in there, they're not making an offer on it. So you lose half of those buyers. So you want a good lockbox. You want to be out of the property and try to okay every single showing that you can. Now, you will be getting calls from realtors and be nice to them. They have all the buyers, so don't be rude. It's happened to me so many times. I could call up a for sale banner, and before I can even open my mouth, they're yelling at me. So they wonder why a lot of agents don't want to work with them. It's reasons like this. So don't be rude to them. They've got all the buyers. And you're going to want to filter out people that want to see your property. You want to pre-qualify them. Not everybody should get your time. So buyers should be pre-qualified in terms of motivation, like how soon do they want to move into the property. And if they're pre-qualified by a mortgage specialist or mortgage broker, you'd be shocked at how many deals collapse due to financing. And the big reason is because the banks and the mortgage brokers don't do a good job when it comes to pre-qualifying those buyers. Sometimes they don't even pull the credit of the buyer. And they might be making like say $100,000 a year, but they might have like a 500 credit score and have so much debt that they can't do anything. And they might make an offer, it gets accepted, and then 10 days goes by and you get like a non-waiver because the financing didn't go through. But this whole problem could have been solved from the start if that buyer got a pre-qualification done. So you want to filter them out so that you can not waste your time, basically. Moving along to offers, negotiations, and basically selling the property. Now, first things first, just a mindset point that I have is that to be good at something, you need to have a lot of experience doing it. And I think to be a good salesperson in real estate, you need to have sold like 100 properties. Experience working in a down market, a hot market, writing, strange conditions and addendums and having deals blow up and stuff like that. You need to be well versed in the entire process. And I think it takes about maybe 100 sales to get to that point. And this alone is why I would hire a realtor and not go with the for sale by owner route. I think this can make a huge difference and potentially make your life so much easier and put more money in your pocket in the end. And again, you can't be an engineer just by being good at math. Like you need to go through the process, or you can't be an expert car salesman by selling a handful of cars. Like you need to be doing it all the time and just be well versed in the entire process. Now, when it comes to like offers and negotiations, I find a lot of FSBOs can have some weird conditions. Like I'll come across people and their home will be conditionally sold for like 2 months. Like, I don't know what's going on with that. This is common. You get all sorts of weird conditions with the FSBO properties. And like, what I'll say to this is that if somebody is truly pre-qualified, they can have their approval done in like 5 to 7 days. Like if they're talking with their mortgage broker, they pulled their credits, they've got all the tax and income documents, that broker probably needs like 5 days to get that from a pre-approval to a firm approval. And a home inspection only takes like 3 hours. So like it shouldn't take forever. Like most conditional periods should last like 10 days, but it's common that I'll see some weird conditions with FSBOs and they're pending forever, it seems like. So just be mindful of that. It doesn't take too long to go from like a conditionally sold property to a sold property. For condo transactions, if I'm the owner, I would pull all the condo documents immediately. It makes your life so much easier. Sure, it's costly. It might cost you $200 or whatever. But condo management companies are notoriously difficult to deal with. You call them, no one answers. You send them an email, you get a response 3 days later. If you do manage to get it under contract, the buyer is going to put in there like a condo review, and they might not give you much time. They might give you like 3 or 4 days, and then it might take like 3 days just to get a response back from the management company regarding the condo documents. So it can be a very stressful time. So I would do that in advance. Just make your life a lot easier. You're going to have to be good at writing amendments. Now, this might sound easy, but this is actually one of the harder parts of the job, to make the amendments make sense and have some teeth behind it so that it forces the buyer or the seller to do whatever they need to do. So this takes time and training to be good at writing amendments. Like, it's not easy to write legal stuff. Like, I'm not a lawyer by any means, but we do have to be well versed in stuff like this to complete the contracts. And again, you can minimize this by having disclosed, repaired, or fixed anything in advance, just so nothing pops up. So you can help. Negotiations are easier if you follow the process, from start to finish. I've actually got a video on this topic called How to Sell It Quickly, which you can see right here. And this will actually help you through the process step by step, so you can avoid all of these things that might pop up along the way. So you've managed to get your property conditionally sold. Now it's time to figure out what to do with the deposit. Now there are 2 ways that you can go about doing this. Odds are there's a buyer's agent involved. So you could potentially hold the deposit in their trust account. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable leaving the deposit with the for sale by owner. But the FSBO, they can also hire a lawyer, and you can hold the deposit in their trust account. But either or, like, there are specific laws for the trust deposits. So I think you'll be protected either way. Now, staying on the topic of lawyers. So now if you manage to get the property firm sold, so all the conditions are removed, now it's time for both the buyer and the seller to pick out their own lawyers. And then typically, if it's like a conventional sale, the listing brokerage will forward all of the information to both lawyers. Now, another point, I hear this all the time when I'm calling for sale buyers. I don't need a realtor. I'll let the lawyer do everything. This is a very common objection, but you'll realize the lawyer comes in at the very end of the transaction. So the lawyer is not going to market your home, sell it, negotiate the offers, write up amendments to fix, different things during the transaction, show the property. So I get that quite often, but their job is more so to, talk to the mortgage brokers and the banks to get the money, and then deal with land titles. So they have a role in this process, but it's not necessarily the role that a lot of for sale bidders think it is. But I do get that objection quite often, and I always shake my head when I hear that, because the lawyer is not going to sell the home for you. And lastly, on lawyers, I would pick out somebody that specializes in real estate law. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. There's lawyers for everything. Like, there's criminal lawyers, there's litigation lawyers, but I would pick someone that specializes in real estate law. It makes the whole transaction a lot easier at this closing stage.
All right. Next up, I will actually take you through a blank purchase contract, just so you can kind of get a better idea of what to be mindful of. Now, this isn't just for the FSBOs. It's good for anyone else out there. It's pretty dry material, so I will go through it real quick and just summarize the main points. So I picked a condo purchase contract just because it's more involved, but I'll cover it real quickly. So the contract number, seller's names, buyer's names, address, the legal address. So over a condo, you'll have the condo plan, unit number, unit factor. Now, most lawsuits in real estate are related to condo parking and storage, because the stall number might be different than the legal unit number. So you need to pull the title for the parking as well. It can be kind of complicated. So that's this section right here. Again, they can be titled or assigned, so you need to make sure you've got the right information. This is the section where you put all the unattached goods, like fridge, stove, dishwasher, stuff like that. All attached goods except for, this will be for, things that are fixed to the structure that you want to exclude. Maybe it's like fancy blinds or something like that, or stuff along those lines. Purchase price, the possession date. In general terms, this is like the laws of Alberta apply, Alberta time, business days, no, not Saturday or Sunday. So just very generic stuff right there. Real property reports don't generally apply to condos, but if you're selling a detached property, there's a section on the RPR, which is very important. If you don't know what that is, please reach out. I'd love to help you out. Regarding deposits, so you put in here the seller's brokerage will provide this contract and related documents to the appointed lawyers. Sorry, this is not the deposit rate. This is just in a conventional type listing, the seller's brokerage, you put in sellers here, will provide all the documents to the buyer's lawyer, seller's lawyer, and we just handle all that sort of back end thing. Deposit section right here. So this, you put down here, the seller and buyer appoint. In my case, this would be real broker, or it can be like a Remax or a Royal LePage would be in this section right here. If it was a buyer dealing directly with a for sale by owner, you might want to put in here, a lawyer's trust account or something like that. The deposit amount, the method of payment. So typically it's a bank draft or a wire transfer on or before. Typically it's within 2 business days of acceptance. Sometimes if there are longer possessions, you might want to have an additional deposit, which you'd put in here. So the same thing, bank draft on or before within 2 business days after all conditions are removed is typically the case. Just to summarize it briefly, the deposit is returned to the buyer. If the buyer, if it's a conditional and for some reason the financing falls through or the home inspection falls apart, the buyer will get the deposit back. If the buyer waives all conditions and then say it's like a day before possession and they just back out of the transaction, the seller could keep the deposit. So it's fair to both sides. Land title. So where are we here? So the title will be free of all encumbrances, liens, and interests, except for those implied by law. So that example I used earlier is there are things that will always be on the title, like restrictive covenants, utility right-of-ways. They will always be passed on to the next buyer regardless. But the next buyer won't inherit things that the previous buyer has, like the writ with the Canada Revenue Agency or the caveats that guy had on there in that example. So that's why the title is very important, because you can't sell it if there are things on title like that can't be resolved before possession day. So that it could blow up for that reason. Representations and warranties, the seller has the right to sell the property, just stuff like that, very generic terms. Dower, this is if there's only one person on title, but they're a married couple, then the non-title spouse will have to sign off on this. It's kind of a pain, but I understand why they do it. There's extra paperwork if dower does apply. This whole next section, all conditions, so condominium documents condition. There's a huge list of items. So all of this stuff over here, all of this stuff are all condominium documents. It's not a fun experience to gather all these up. And if you're doing it last minute, it's even more, what's the word? It sucks, basically. So get all of these in advance if you can. Financing condition, property inspection condition, very common. Sale of buyer's property. We go into this section right here, and you have room for other conditions. We don't really use these too often, but there is room for something else. And even seller's conditions. We don't see this too often, but it could pop up. Additional terms. So if there's seller financing, this might be a big one for the FSBOs out there. You get a lot of people approaching FSBOs trying to do some weird financial arrangement, and that's where you tick off this box right here, or mortgage assumption. Another big one here, addendums, or the sale of the buyer's property schedule. So if you are buying a property, but you have to sell yours first, you would tick this off, and there's another form that you'd add on to this. You put the condo fee here. 9.3, this looks unassuming, but this is one of the most important sections in the contract. This is where you would write all the but different amendments and stuff like that. It can be quite difficult. Some of these, because you need to be concise and have proper legal language and have teeth behind it. So that's the section right here, like holdbacks and stuff like that. Pre-possession walkthroughs would all go in this section over here. The closing process. So this is the lawyer process. So if you're curious, the example I gave earlier, that a lot of FSBOs will say, I don't need a realtor, I'll just get the lawyer to do everything. So if you are curious what they do, this is the lawyer's process right here. And they do a lot of different things, like they will adjust for property taxes that you've paid, condominium contributions, they'll talk to the banks, they'll talk to land titles, stuff like that. So they'll help you with the RPR, that they'll look it over with you. So they have a role in this, but it's not to sell your property. Closing day delays, there's a weird ratio in here. Yeah, A to B financial at the completion day plus 3% calculated daily. So there's stuff like that that the lawyers can help out with. Obviously, keep the property insured until completion. Remedies, if either party is at fault, the other party can sue, basically. Notices and documents, everything needs to be written, like signed off by both relevant parties, all relevant parties. Brokerage information, confirmation of contract terms, just generic stuff. Legal obligations begin as soon as this contract is signed. Here's more signatures, and that's it. So that's a real quick rundown of the purchase contract.
So we're just about done here, but the last thing I'd like to go over are just the common objections I get over and over again calling for sale by owners. And I do this to give it back to them and just to explain maybe why they should look at someone like myself to help them along in the process. So number one, the most common objection in real estate dealing with for sale by owners is bring me a buyer and I'll pay you the commission. So we actually already went over this one earlier. Again, you are paying somebody to negotiate against you. So you've already committed to paying at least half the commission, and now the other half, it's probably not worth your time because the other agent is working for the buyer. They're not your friend. They're negotiating against you. And say the total commission would be $16,000. You've already committed to say $8,000 if that agent brings you a buyer. The other $8,000. I mean, you could easily drop $10,000 just on Google Ads to help sell the property. So I don't think you're going to come out ahead. If you truly want to get the home sold on your own, you're going to have to spend some money on marketing and stuff like that. I don't think you're going to come out ahead. You never know, but that's just my take on it. Number two, I can list it on the MLS system on my own. I don't need a realtor. I'll just do it that way. We also already went over this one. It's true, you can list it on the MLS, but again, these companies, they put down 1 cent commission. You're not going to get any buyers or their agents coming to see your property with 1 cent commission, or you have to negotiate the commission in advance. A lot of agents don't want to get involved in that. Just stuff like that. And the last one is that the buyers and agents, they have their buyer agreements, and we go over how we get paid. And if there's any shortfall in the commission, the expectation is the buyer pays for it. A lot of them don't want to get involved in that. So there are complications. Number three, I can get more money in my pocket selling it privately. Theoretically, yes, that is the case. But again, 90% of all transactions are realtor to realtor. So you're dealing with the 10% here. So again, these are like investors, people that are looking for some weird financial arrangements. You're going to have to spend a lot of money on marketing in order to capture enough people to sell on your own. Odds are you're probably not going to come out ahead. Statistically, they do sell for 10% less on average, which is more than the commission. So my counter to that is I can get you 10% more on average if you hire someone like myself. Number four, I've got a friend in the business. All I can say to this is that you should hire them. You'll probably get more money in your pocket if you use them. Hiring a friend, it can be tough sometimes. Some friends are easy to deal with. Some friends are kind of a pain. So it's all based on your situation. But my response is you should probably look at hiring them. Number five, I'm going to rent it out if it doesn't sell. Now, this is a legitimate option. Right now, our rental market is pretty hot. But is that your plan A or your plan B? And if you do decide to rent it out, are you going to have to spend some money afterwards to get it back into the right shape? Like maybe the tenant trashes the property. Like maybe you need new flooring or appliances and paint and whatnot. So it might be more costly in the end to rent it out. So you never know. Number six is waiting. There's not much I can say to this one. There's always people naturally procrastinate. They're always waiting for something. They're waiting for the spring market. They're waiting for the next election. They're waiting for this. They're waiting for that. I can't really do too much. Number seven, I've already chosen an agent. What I would say to this is that, are you open to having a second opinion? Again, statistically, most agents sell like 2 to 3 homes per year, and most of them are actually working on the buying end, not so much the selling end. So you want to hire someone that's strong on the listing end of the business. It is harder, there's more responsibility being a listing agent, and all I can offer is a second opinion. It's a big transaction, and it might be worth your time to get a second opinion. And finally, number 8, the last one, can you cut your commission? My answer to this one is always no. If I can't negotiate my own commission, I have no business negotiating on your behalf selling your property. So I want to show the sellers up front that I mean business and that I'm not a pushover. So I always just say no to that. And why would you hire someone that's not like strong on that end of the business? Is my answer to that, basically. So that's a crash course on selling a property from the perspective of a for sale by owner. Now, again, I don't think you're going to be saving a lot of money. You're probably going to be committed to at least half the commission, and the other half is probably not worth the time and headache, money and hassle of doing it. So I think you'll come out ahead in the end if you hire a strong listing agent like myself. If you're out there watching this and you could use some help, you can call, text, email, or even comment, and I will get back to you. I'd love to look into your situation and see how I can help you out. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.